all stories need conflict. This is true across all of storytelling, in all its forms. If Frodo could just waltz into Mordor and huck the One Ring into the fires of Mount Doom, then there would be no Lord of the Rings. Instead, he and his fellowship are beset by orcs, ringwraiths, the Dark Lord Sauron, and the emotional and mental turmoil the One Ring stokes in its holder. Conflict is central within interactive narratives, necessitated by storytelling beats and, more often than not, their game-based design. What challenges protagonists, and by proxy, players, between title and credits? Conflict can be a literal external force. Count Olaf preventing the Baudelaires from living a peaceful post-grief existence. Bowser and his army of minions slowing down Mario's efforts to rescue Princess Peach. Or the Joker standing opposed to Batman's drive to prevent chaos in Gotham City. Conflict can be internal. Luke Skywalker's struggle between his father's legacy of pain and his own desire for peace. Joel Miller's desire to feel loved and redeemed blinding him to what the world needs. Or Kratos' journey to grow past the shadow of his former self and past deeds. Conflict's primary purpose, no matter the form, no matter the medium, is simple: to add uncertainty as to whether a character's goal will ultimately be achieved. Conflict is at the core of the Dead Space series, and not just through its enemy design and heart-pounding atmosphere. Through its main series, each fight for survival presents new obstacles and reframes old ones, forcing players to confront and overcome every iteration of narrative conflict by the end of the saga. To that end, there's no better place to start than the beginning. In the first entry, 2008's Dead Space, players control engineer Isaac Clarke. Isaac and a small team are responding to a communications blackout on the USG Ishimura, a large-scale mining and planet-cracking vessel in orbit over the mineral-rich planet Aegis 7. Isaac's girlfriend, Nicole, is working aboard the Ishimura, so Isaac jumped at the chance to assist. The routine operation quickly takes a turn for the worse. Horrifying, twisted creatures called necromorphs attack and scatter the responding crew before destroying the crew's shuttle. With no way off the Ishimura, the routine mission becomes a fight for survival, both against the might of the necromorphs and the indifference of space. As players learn from their own experience and various logs on the Ishimura, the necromorph invasion is, as a force of nature, propagated by the influence of the marker found on Aegis 7. More on the marker later. Kendra, one of Isaac's crewmates, describes the creatures as biorecombinators.
They take dead tissue, absorb it, and mold it into new forms. One iteration seems to have the sole purpose of infecting corpses. The others, seem to be making corpses to infect.
The necromorphs in Dead Space are an embodiment of nature the same way any animal in the wild is. They seek to survive, and to survive means propagation by whatever means. They are not malicious, necessarily, no matter what vibes the shrieking and the stabbing give off. They merely seek to exist. They are existing in the only way they know how, which, by their very nature, puts them in conflict with our protagonist. The necromorph seeks to multiply by making corpses to infect, so it strives to make a corpse out of Isaac. Isaac is in conflict with this. If he dies, then he experiences a notably horrible death and cannot help Nicole. Thus, he endeavors to survive so as to avoid pain and death, the core of the human experience, find Nicole and ensure her safety, and escape the vessel to live out his life. But the necromorphs do not have any moral quandaries about the pursuits of others. Screams and protests do nothing to deter them. They are an infection that seeks to spread like a virus. They are either so far below people that they are singular and primal as to their need to spread, or so far beyond people as to seek complete assimilation with other life forms. Neither is less terrifying to consider. On the other side, surrounding the USG Ishimura on all sides sprawls the void and vacuum of space, nature in its most distilled form. Asteroids, no gravity to tether us, no oxygen outside our bubble of breathable air constantly threatening to burst. All things that simply are, but are also a massive threat to human survival. Space simply was not designed with people in mind. Most of the Dead Space experience is both trying to escape the bubble in the middle of space and trying to keep that bubble from popping in the meantime. Prevent asteroids from shredding the hull, ensure clean oxygen can filter throughout the ship, open up a communications relay for an SOS broadcast. The necromorphs can be seen as the primary, short-term source of conflict, what with their bladed limbs and penchant for running at a dead sprint towards Isaac. But the threat of space, the overall need to survive within it, is the long-term conflict. You could be the most crack-shot space engineer this side of the cosmos, but you can't shoot your way out of a vacuum. Space is a different beast of nature. Whereas humanity has adapted and come up with ways and methods to survive, at least for a time, in almost every earthen biome, from harsh deserts to dense forests, space simply is. Without advanced tools and equipment, it is physically impossible for a human to live for long in space. The threat here is not simply death, but the absence of safety. Shelter can be constructed in the wild, but not on an isolated bubble in space. The shelter is already constructed and launched, and nothing can help you if it buckles too far against the indifference of space. On either side of Dead Space's conflict pendulum lie the natural. Dangerous, frenetic necromorphs on the one side, and the cold, empty vacuum of space on the other. In the middle, swinging back and forth between those polarities, is the conflict with technology. Consider the USG Ishimura again, that bubble within the vastness of space. While it is threatened by complete destruction and breakdown multiple times, what's fascinating is watching its small-scale breakdowns as a result of technology, both as designed and as its systems collapse. For example, the vessel uses gravity panels to maintain the artificial gravity in space. As the necromorph invasion spreads, those elements of the ship start failing, and all parties, human and necromorph alike, can accidentally walk into a malfunctioning panel and be violently thrown into the ceiling. A simple feature that gives the crew a sense of mundane normalcy becomes one of its most dangerous elements when it malfunctions. In this sense, the vessel becomes more unregulated. Technology is still doing something by its design, but it now comes into conflict with Isaac's survival. The Ishimura is also equipped with quarantine lockdown sequences. When certain rooms in the ship detect foreign matter, like necromorphs, they go into a total lockdown until the issue is addressed and disposed of. This naturally locks players in a confined space with waves of necromorphs bearing down on them from all angles, sirens blaring and alarm lights flashing. While an effective feature in theory, the very feature designed to keep people safe ends up doing potentially fatal harm. No matter how many times I play Dead Space, I always end up feeling most tense in locked room situations. A fatal flaw of the ship's design, and that which puts me in direct conflict with technology. Science and technology also pave the way for necromorph-based issues. The recurring antagonist, Dr. Chalice Mercer, has been researching the necromorphs and created one of his very own, the Hunter, a marriage of the horrifying natural when prodded with just enough unfettered science. While exceedingly strong on its own, the Hunter's greatest boon is its ability to regenerate lost limbs. After being instructed to cut off the limbs of necromorphs all game, the Hunter throws a massive wrench into the tried and true method of survival. It takes unconventional methods to slow the Hunter, even temporarily, and an entire shuttle rocket ignition at point-blank distance to finally kill it. The rescue ship encountered in the later chapters, the USM Valor, is chock full of shock troopers, all outfitted with in-suit stasis modules. Stasis modules, in-game, allow for users to produce small-scale time dilations, forcing objects and organic creatures to move at a decelerated rate from the user's perspective for an amount of time. When the necromorphs assimilated into the shock troopers, they assimilated with the stasis modules, granting the necromorphs the perspective of everything moving at a decelerated pace. From Isaac's perspective, they fly around the room and rush him at breakneck speed, making the horrifying creatures magnitudes more terrifying. Technology, for all that it's designed to make human living easier and more efficient, is at some of its narrative best when its design goes awry, when it's used in some unexpected and terrifying way, or when it does exactly what it was designed to do all along. Horror games excel by making players feel trapped by the horror elements, be it due to infrastructure, you're in a building and you can't escape, geography, you're in the middle of nowhere so the only way out is through, or circumstance, my lover is trapped and needs saving and I can't leave without them. Dead Space somehow capitalizes on all three of those all at once, all throughout the experience. Isaac's struggle revolves around being trapped in and trying to survive in a hostile world against hostile creatures, all while trying to make that hostile world more survivable, even just for a little while. But something always snowballs and goes wrong. More necromorphs show up after he's killed a bunch. Another system on the Ishimura is failing. Isaac is in a constant state of slapping bandages on various problems, unable to get the ship operational long term. His lot is to maintain some level of control over the uncontrollable, putting him in direct conflict with nature and technology throughout. Given the circumstances, the USG Ishimura is going to keep breaking down. Even if Isaac flushes out one major problem, another will crop up in time. Everything that Isaac encounters took a mere 48 hours to manifest, and he is but one engineer in a massive vessel. Systems were bound to keep failing, if only for the sheer rate of reproduction necromorphs are capable of. Complete breakdown was inevitable, if not for Isaac ultimately escaping the doomed craft. On the necromorph side, there is no reasoning with or controlling them at this stage. They are single-minded and are far beyond or well beneath the needs of humanity. It twists and corrupts what humans have normalized, physically and mentally alike, scarring and destroying people both directly and psychologically. The necromorph organism is a force of nature. Thinking that anyone is capable of stopping, containing, or controlling nature in the long term is a fool's errand. Nature always wins out because nature simply is. If it can't overcome its obstacle, it can always outlast it. And as finite as our human lives are, individually and on the grand scale of existence, that might be the most terrifying thing of all. At the center of the Dead Space narrative is the Marker, a twisting structure chiseled with markings and glyphs completely alien in its design and language. The Marker is at the epicenter of the Unitology faith in human space, a religion that espouses tenets of transformation and rebirth, all while calling for the abandonment of reason in and unwavering faith from its followers. The Markers, according to Unitology, were the sacred catalyst that would reunite humanity with their divine alien creators after death. Objectively speaking, the Marker has the capacity to influence the minds of those around it to a great distance. Its effects could be felt throughout the surface colony on Aegis 7 and throughout the USG Ishimura when it was brought on board. On the planet's surface, it triggered various responses in people. Some became highly depressed and began suffering from dementia and insomnia, while others grew manic and paranoid, performing gruesome acts of mutilation both to others and themselves. The first wave of preparation for new necromorph hosts. Dr. Mercer, a devout believer of Unitology, espouses the following.
Do not abandon your faith. What's happening on the colony is not a tragedy. It's God. Its truth is even more fantastic. On the planet below us, we have found a marker. God's plan is unfolding and we are its inheritors. We will ascend as we always knew we would. Unitology is truth, and your death is the first phase. Be deterred by the physical methods of transformation. Soon, you will be beyond any physical concerns. You must have faith, fools. This is what we have been searching for all these years. This is what we have been waiting for. Don't listen to them. Come back! Come back!
Others, like Isaac, would see images and hallucinations of loved ones, guiding them towards specific actions or paths. All of those are terrifying in their own right. But perhaps the most terrifying is that the threat is not nearly as alien as we would want to believe. Again, from Kendra.
The Marker, this divine relic, made by man. They reverse engineered it a couple of hundred years ago from the real Marker, a true alien artifact recovered on Earth. They dug it up, studied it, and they made it their own. Then they brought it to Aegis 7 and activated it. And you've seen the result. The stuff of nightmares.
Research on the original marker was with the intent to discover a source of renewable energy. Its intent may have been noble to begin with, but it quickly devolved into a thing of faith and fanaticism. People studied the marker, created duplicates, and scattered them throughout space. All this after having seen the results of the marker's influence, the necromorphs. In this case, the hubris of humanity is the source of natural conflict. Whether they pursued it out of scientific curiosity, a faith-driven crusade, or some unholy blend of the two, humanity's stance that they had a modicum of control over the marker proved to be their undoing on Aegis 7. Even though those same people may have been acting in accordance with the marker's influence, the marker knew how to influence them, how to make them think it was their idea, a good idea. The marker operates far beyond human comprehension, a force of nature that sees humanity as a blip, a resource to be influenced and, in time, assimilated. The marker is a creation of technology, a man-made force of nature. Geomythology, according to the term's creator, Dorothy Vitaliano, is the study of the actual geologic origins of natural phenomena which were long explained in terms of myth and folklore. Man, Vitaliano continues in a separate study, has always sought to explain his natural environment. Natural earthen structures were given form by deities or giant animals. Lightning and thunderstorms were associated with thunderbirds and gods of thunder. A giant catfish was responsible for earthquakes. Perceiving the natural as divine traces back as far as humanity has believed in higher powers. But science has shown across the board that there are explanations for all of these things rooted in various branches of science. Even the marker, even the necromorph contagion. Unitology explains the transformation as the process of unification, of life after death, but it's far simpler than that. It's just the natural order at work. The marker seeks to spread its influence, and so it does. Necromorphs seek to make more of themselves, and so they do. The most devout unitologists believe this to be the way to salvation, and so they perpetuate the process. Perhaps most telling, though, is humanity's perspective on nature as a source of conflict to begin with. If it stands against humanity, even passively, it is opposition. When a hurricane crashes inland, when a natural fire rages out of control, when an earthquake rocks an area, it's a hazard. It simply is. It only becomes a disaster when a natural hazard meets a human population. In the long term, nature is unstoppable. It is a force that can outlast anything that stands against it, capitalizing on the one thing humans lack: time. Even if Isaac succeeds on the Ishimura and Aegis 7, even if he stops this onslaught, prevents additional destruction here, there are still other markers in the universe. They will wait. The marker and the necromorph contagion only became an issue because there were humans around to tamper with it. No humans, no hosts to influence and infect, no necromorphs. But perhaps the marker always knew in some deep old way, for as long as it was buried underneath the earth, something would eventually evolve to try and comprehend it. And so, it waited, simply because it could. That is the core of conflict with nature, and that is why Dead Space is as terrifying as it is. Because it's a battle that we may win from time to time, but it's a war we will always ultimately lose. In the second entry, 2011's Dead Space 2, 3 years have passed since Isaac escaped the horrors aboard the USG Ishimura and Aegis 7. After being recovered somewhere in space, Isaac has been under close observation and is undergoing therapy in a state-sanctioned facility, where things don't appear to be getting better for him. The setting shifts from deep space to relatively close to home, Titan Station, or the Sprawl, a colony built around the remnants of Saturn's eponymous moon. Titan itself is a monument to humanity's advancement, serving as ground zero for the very first planet crack decades prior. Things quickly escalate as the facility is overrun by necromorphs. Isaac is forced to piece together what drew the Scourge to the Sprawl, all while he battles against opposing forces, both human and alien, along with increasingly violent hallucinations of his deceased girlfriend, Nicole. Natural and technological forces have been established, both integral to the series as a whole. Now, Dead Space can start to look at more human forms of conflict, both externally and internally. Unitology, the religious following peppered throughout Dead Space, takes center stage in Dead Space 2. Unitologists, under the guise of being non-affiliated allies, lure Isaac to them so as to use the knowledge imparted to him following his exposure to the Red Marker on Aegis 7. Isaac has been able to see symbols and instructions in the hallucinations ever since the Ishimura incident, something lost on most who are exposed to the marker. Unitologists seek to exploit that ability in order to create more markers throughout space. Until players learn that these allies are Unitologists, it's business as usual, an offering to help stave off or even stop the hallucinations that Isaac is suffering from. Leading up to that point, players learn in-game about the public-facing background of Unitology, including its place in and throughout society, so much so that fighting against them is akin to fighting against society. Unitology is a wide-reaching religion operating on and within all of society's levels, from its leaders to its citizenry. Amidst constant galactic expansion and the human experience being stretched across the stars, simple creeds and mantras of unity were an effective focus for the organization, propelling it into the largest religious following and most rapidly expanding faith in all of human history. For their public-facing image, Unitology is highly evangelical, constantly in a state of recruitment. Whether this evangelization is mundane, genuine, or sinister depends entirely on the church member, often dictated by their position within Unitology. More on that next. Within Dead Space 2, Unitologist churches are just as much sites of conversion as they are houses of worship and ritual. Entire sections are devoted to small-scale projection theaters, gift shops, and friendly lore dumps pumped through in-house speakers. This is as much to convince you to join them as it is for them to gauge how long they can hold on to you. Behind the scenes, Unitologists are obsessed with life after death and the unity they believe it comes with. In controlled environments, like the Sprawl pre-invasion, Unitologists are cryogenically frozen upon death so their body doesn't decay, leaving it in perfect condition, ready for convergence, the prophesized making all things whole that Unitologists await. In more time-sensitive situations like the Ishimura incident, followers may commit mass suicide to prepare their bodies for a more short-term transformation. Outside of major necromorph outbreaks, Unitology is a highly materialistic organization. Between the gift shops and monetizing little black marker paperweights, they also require heavy sums of money from followers to advance in the faith. With each advancement, more and more secrets are divulged. Unitology's insular us versus them mentality ensures that sensitive information stays within the church, while also ensuring that the highest-ranking members of the church have that money. Only positions of power and authority throughout the galaxy have access to those kinds of funds. Everyone else, given the messaging, can just be part of the system as a follower, giving bits and pieces what they can afford throughout their time in the faith. Magnify those bits and pieces by largest religion in history numbers, though, and it adds up quickly. With this level of influence and access to resources, Unitology was able to orchestrate the Ishimura incident by embedding Unitologists throughout its crew, including its captain. More, they were directly responsible for releasing necromorphs into and around Titan Station, in the hopes of creating more necromorphs through the ensuing carnage. Elaborating, the leadership of Unitology, the same that Isaac was allied with in the beginning of Dead Space 2, knew that was their ultimate goal, but they manipulated lower-ranking members of the church to do the actual work of opening the floodgates. Conflict with society often places individual people in positions of service to or against those larger systems or leaders. Dead Space 2 lets us explore Unitology more in depth than before, giving us a glimpse at their indoctrinating overarching foundation, not just their bloody cultish results. Familiar elements of faith are twisted and magnified in Unitology, but the similarities between fiction and reality are everywhere. They, and religion as a whole, are a perfect societal force to reckon with. On the flip side of church is state, here embodied by the Earth Government Colonial Alliance, or EarthGov. Director Hans Tideman embodies EarthGov as he oversees Titan Station operations, both before and during the Necromorph outbreak. More personally, Tideman was directly involved in recovering Isaac after the events aboard the Ishimura. Upon return, Tideman locked Isaac in a state-sanctioned facility on Titan due to what Isaac has witnessed and what he is capable of, creating more markers. Initially, EarthGov keeps Isaac alive due to the knowledge the red marker embedded in his mind. As players and Isaac learn, EarthGov and Tideman forced Isaac to undergo invasive procedures to extract that knowledge from the visual receptors of his brain. Their hope is to use that knowledge and the constructed marker to both understand the object and to harness its energy-based properties, energy and resource shortages being a constant struggle of the Dead Space setting. Isaac and the information he houses in his mind are more useful than he is a liability, despite Tideman's reservations. In a moment of defeat much later, Tideman laments.
I knew you were trouble from the start, but they told me you were necessary. That your mind was the purest. I spent years sifting through your demented brain. This is not the way it was supposed to happen.
By the time Isaac regains consciousness in the facility he's been kept in, the outbreak has begun again, and Isaac is on a kill list from EarthGov. Now that Isaac has outlived his usefulness, he's just a loose end that needs tying off. With Isaac on the run, Tideman knows that he is a direct threat to the marker and takes all manner of steps to stop Isaac's advance, using the station's full capabilities and the power of the localized armed forces to do so. Things he is able to do because of his position within society, acting on its behalf. Despite his efforts to evacuate the sprawl once the necromorphs were released into the population, Tideman and EarthGov still perpetuate more destruction than they do salvation. The EarthGov body has been involved with the markers for hundreds of years, covering up and spinning all manner of tragedies as definitely not alien-related. They are the atoms orbiting the nucleus of the main threat, believing that they ultimately have control over it. Despite so many instances of death and destruction from the original marker's discovery on Earth to as recently as the Ishimura incident, EarthGov always chooses to proceed. They are never deterred by the destruction in the marker's wake. It only spurs them onward. No loss of life is too catastrophic for them to stop. From director Tideman as the marker is awoken by the influx of newly created necromorphs.
We have it under control! Clark, this is not our fault! We were so close to understanding it.
And again, as Isaac approaches the marker to destroy it, Tideman between the two.
The research in that marker is worth every life we just lost! I won't let you throw all this away!
Tideman is the embodiment of an arm of society no longer serving society, and a perfect antagonistic force. As a collective power, they saw the effects of the marker and ignored all the warnings, using their great power and influence to suppress the truth and proceed forward, instead of adjusting for or defending against what the markers were capable of. Additionally, a mysterious endgame communication hints at an unnamed overseer, whose response to the Titan Station disaster is one of inconvenience. They note that other sites will have to pick up the pace as though it were a simple business transaction gone sideways. Untold numbers of people perished on Titan Station, but EarthGov's stretch is so wide that its most powerful members can see the entire situation as a misstep to be calculated for, rather than a monumental loss of human life. Between both factions, it's also telling that they're both fighting to possess Isaac, whether to use him or dispose of him. A recurring element of conflict with society is that of dehumanization, of being a cog or a vessel for powers and systems far greater than the individual. Neither care about Isaac. In the case of EarthGov, they chose to exploit what he had experienced and ultimately dispose of him, rather than help him and others who had suffered similarly. Unitology, based on their objectives, would have done the exact same thing had their extraction plan succeeded. It is the choice and the ultimate downfall of society's most powerful agents to dehumanize the people they are designed to serve. More than necromorphs, EarthGov, or unitology, the one thing that stands most strongly against Isaac is Isaac himself. From start to finish, Isaac is in a constant state of inner turmoil brought about by his location, circumstance, regret, and repression. All of them affect him so strongly because of his experience, what he's seen, and what he's survived. Isaac isn't familiar with Titan Station, but he is familiar with the USG Ishimura. The planet Cracker has long since been repossessed by EarthGov, being deep cleaned and prepped for decommission, and is exactly as Isaac left it 3 years prior, cleaning tarp and downed lighting systems notwithstanding. The Ishimura sequence is a fascinating look into Isaac's location-based trauma, manifesting in different hallucinations than he'd been experiencing up to that point. Aboard the Ishimura, he experiences flashbacks and ghost pains rather than full-blown interactions with his hallucinations. As covered in text logs, all the original assimilated crew had been reduced to sludge after the Red Marker's destruction in dead space. What Isaac is experiencing are new intruders from Titan, interspersed over his own memories flooding back as he traverses the doomed vessel once again. But the most prevalent source of inner conflict is Nicole, Isaac's girlfriend, both as a positive and negative anchor. For most of the experience, Nicole manifests as an aggressive, challenging, and violent hallucination. Between her introduction against the Red Marker, it can be assumed she has some tie to the marker itself, perhaps its influence or reach within Isaac's mind. By taking the form of someone familiar and regretful, the marker can personify and amplify Isaac's deepest traumas. This may be an alternative method of killing the subject, as Isaac has proven capable of defending himself against traditional necromorphs. But digging so deep in the subject's mind, manifesting that imperative in such a personal way, makes it a perfect example of conflict against self. The recurring piece, whether it's marker-controlled or Isaac-initiated, is the sense of repression surrounding Nicole's appearances. As Isaac encounters and overcomes Nicole's appearances, she grows increasingly hostile, challenging him to look inward and discover or admit just what she is. Who am I, Isaac? Is the general theme of her appearances. For most of the experience, she is something to resist, something that antagonizes and torments Isaac.
We had 2 years together, Isaac. They were the best years of my life. I was happy. I had everything I wanted. Until you made me doubt myself. Why would I choose the innocent girl over you? You said regret passing up the chance. That the choice was on me forever. It was as if you wanted me to leave. Why'd you come looking for me if you knew I was dead, Isaac? Did you think I would forgive you? You never found my body. Never said goodbye. Was I just stuck in the morgue with the others? Another random casualty? Or did they turn me into one of them? Wearing my bloody face, stalking the halls, looking for more victims. I'm so cold, Isaac. It hurts. Where are you going? You can't run from the pain forever. Soon you'll beg for a way to end it all. The cracks are showing, Isaac, and the memories are seeping in. And when they do, I'll be waiting for you. How do you do it? How do you hold it all inside? Your face never betraying your pain. No one would ever know the guilt you feel. Never know the dark thoughts you keep. How convenient. Destroy the marker and all the hurt and pain go away. Imagine that, Isaac. You'll never have to listen to your heart. Why do you insist these memories are somehow my fault? This isn't about the marker, Isaac. This is about you. How is it that you still haven't come to terms with who I am? Who am I, Isaac? I will ask you one more time before the end. Be ready!
Kicking off the final third of the game, Isaac is ambushed by the Nicole hallucination and finally admits to her that he can't let her go, regretful as he is because of how much she meant to him, how much she still means to him. Isaac believes so strongly that he condemned Nicole to death by encouraging her to go aboard the Ishimura and has held on to that belief ever since, where it's festered and rotted throughout his imprisonment. Showing and admitting how tightly he's held on, perhaps even more tightly since confirming her death on the Ishimura, finally drops the facade of anger in the hallucination. Whether through Isaac's shift in perspective or the marker realizing a new approach for its ultimate goal, the hallucination morphs to just Nicole, speaking normally, acting like a person. Here, she becomes something to join. It is, after all, easier to go along with someone when they're not screaming through static and alien script at you. But the marker capitalizes on that inner conflict, bringing it up to the surface and managing to ride in a car that Isaac has already built, rather than try to run after it. On the same vein is Ellie, another survivor that has accompanied Isaac since he escaped the unitologists earlier on. They battle throughout Titan Station together, ultimately reaching the government sector where the marker is housed, before Ellie discovers a gunship they can use to escape on. At this point, Isaac has come to accept that in order to destroy the marker, he has to die. While Ellie is performing diagnostic checks inside the ship, Isaac releases and jettisons the craft off the station. Although Ellie is beside herself with anger, Isaac believes he is doing right, justifying what he's doing against what he's still holding himself responsible for. He's trying to prevent another Nicole. Isaac wants to escape with Ellie, but he needs to destroy the marker. Shifting back, the kinder, gentler Nicole is unnerving at first, but she taps into the core of Isaac's psyche. Even though he regrets what happened to Nicole, she was such a core part of his life that he couldn't bear to let her go, even as she took form to hurt him. Throughout the final gauntlet to the marker, Nicole begs Isaac to let her go, that he knows what he has to do.
Fighting it, Isaac. You can't fight it. You have to let him go.
I'll never see you again.
Isaac, stop it. There's no other way. You have to do this.
The battle between want and need is at the core of any conflict against self, and the manifestation capitalizes on that. Isaac wants to hold on to Nicole, but he needs to get to the marker, even if it means losing that aspect of Nicole. Ultimately, Nicole's gentler visage falls away at the foot of the marker, revealing the marker's ultimate plan within Isaac's mind. By killing Isaac, a maker of this marker, convergence can properly begin. Isaac laments having trusted the Shade and does battle within his mind against the image of Nicole, now acting as a vessel for the marker itself, a true manifestation of conflict against self as two fractals of Isaac's mind trade blows against each other. After successfully destroying the marker, Isaac sits down, the station destructing around him, ready to die on his terms.
You complete bastard! Was this your great plan? Dump me off and die?
And in one of my favorite credits interruptions to date, Ellie breaks through the structure, hell-bent on getting Isaac out of there despite his initial resignation. We're forced to jump back to wants and needs. Isaac wants Ellie to live, so now he needs to live. Isaac is almost always put in the position of fighting against his own wants, his sense of self, so that others may live, whether it's just Ellie or as many people as could be saved by one fewer marker. In Ellie's risky maneuver, Isaac is shown, even for just a moment, that people care about him, and that maybe he doesn't have to fight all of his battles alone, even the ones where he's squaring up against himself. In the trilogy's final entry, 2013's Dead Space 3, players, after a brief prologue, find Isaac in hiding, trying to avoid the markers, unitologists, everything. He's drafted into an operation at the behest of John Carver and Robert Norton, a pair of Earth Defense Force operatives sent by Ellie to find him. Isaac faces one final mission: track Ellie in the far reaches of space back to the marker homeworld, Tau Volantis, find the source of the necromorph scourge, and stop it once and for all. With the external forces and Isaac's internal struggles firmly established, Dead Space 3 pulls the curtain as far back as it can, shining a spotlight on the power, allied and opposed, that a single person can wield, and a final, ultimate source of conflict far beyond them, beyond anyone. Dead Space 3 departs from its predecessor by giving Isaac a larger ensemble of human characters to interact with, most notably the Circle, the Unitologist paramilitary. With the Circle lies the primary conflict against man. Once resigned to zealous corpses and sinister characters on the other side of a blast-proof window, now Isaac has to physically fight through Unitologists to reach his goal. At this point in the story, 3 years after Titan Station's destruction, Unitology has accelerated from evangelizing to crusading. Years of donations amassed from their galactic following helped fund their militarization, giving the Circle the ability and resources to stand against and overthrow EarthGov. While the Unitologists of the past were more than happy to await convergence to make themselves ready as it drew near, they now see their faith under direct threat. Unitology no longer operates in the background behind societal norms. They are free to engage in the name of their faith, violently releasing the influence of markers from various testing sites around the galaxy, triggering new necromorph outbreaks in multiple locations. We find the Circle at the height of its power, disseminating its message via Zeppelin to a lunar colony, having completed several campaigns of liberating markers throughout space. As the only noted person to have destroyed markers before, the Circle targets and hunts Isaac as soon as they find him. Though they do so in the name of their faith, the militarized Unitologists are still just people, albeit radicalized. They rush Isaac, they attempt suicide bombings, they stand opposed to his mission. They are people, twisted by promises and beliefs that have long encouraged them to embrace death with nothing to lose and everything to gain. On that same vein, at the top of the hierarchy, is Jacob Danik, the leader of the Circle. Though his history from before the marker attacks precluding Dead Space 3 is unknown, his actions throughout the game do enough to paint him. As a faith-based leader, he claims to be the mouthpiece of the divine, allowing him to wield the might of militarized followers. Danik represents the more forceful agenda of Unitology. They will no longer wait for convergence, they will trigger it themselves. They will leave others to be taken while they live to awaken more markers elsewhere. His appearances and missives scattered throughout the journey are for the express purposes of emboldening his followers and hindering Isaac. He's constantly attempting to kill Isaac, undermines Isaac's progress with propaganda, coerces important items away by threat of force, and, in the end, reactivates convergence on Tau Volantis. All of this in the name of faith, of which Danik is too deep in to see the logical ramifications of. In a series full of horrifying necromorphs and monsters, I have never wanted to see a character defeated as badly as Danik. Testament to the conflict he provides, even as a mere man. Despite facing the might of a fully armed Unitologist following, Isaac's allies are just as much a source of conflict. Most glaring is Robert Norton, a survivor of a recent marker liberation by the Circle and Ellie's romantic partner. Initially, he recruits Isaac to the mission at Ellie's behest, but quickly starts to turn on and antagonize Isaac. The more Isaac sides with Ellie's desire to stop the source of the necromorphs instead of escape, the more things dissolve. Norton continues to see Isaac's desire to push on as a threat to his relationship with Ellie, believing that Isaac is just trying to side with Ellie and against Norton to win her back after their relationship broke down in the past few years. In the end, Norton summons Danik and the Circle to Tau Volantis. In a desperate bid to escape the planet, Norton offers Tau Volantis' location and Isaac to the Circle in exchange for safe passage off with the crew. Naturally, this blows up in Norton's face because Danik and the Unitologists simply don't care about the wants of those who don't seek convergence. In a final standoff, Norton blames Isaac for bringing them to Tau Volantis and attempts to kill him. Norton ultimately fails, falling to a single shot from Isaac. Maybe Norton's behavior was induced by the markers on the planet. Perhaps it was exacerbated by circumstances, the cementing feeling that this trip was a suicide mission. Maybe it was driven by passion, a desire to protect and live out whatever time he has left with a person he loves. No matter the source, Norton's sense of self-preservation sets him up against Isaac, deterring his and the crew's efforts every chance he can get. Faced with death, overwhelming opposition, and a chance to escape it, it's hard to fault him. Then there's John Carver, the player 2 in cooperative play, who remains present and nearby throughout the entire story. Narratively, he struggles throughout, coping with feelings of failure as a partner and a parent after losing his family to a necromorph outbreak. Across Dead Space 3, he's less of an antagonist and more of a point of challenge, contention, and perspective for Isaac. A career military operative, Carver tends to put the mission first, progress at any cost. Norton threatened the mission, so it is acceptable to have killed him. If we didn't cut the hijacked lift with Santos, a longtime ally, inside, it would have dragged the entire cliff and everyone else down with it. Sacrifice one so that the many may continue. If we don't close this door, then we all die, instead of closing this door and only Ellie dying. At each of these points, Isaac seems to stand opposite him. I shouldn't have killed Norton. I could have saved Santos. I failed Ellie. Carver challenges Isaac each and every time, justifying what had to be done for the good of the mission, even as it seemed to fail the individual. Carver is the personified need, while Isaac embodies want. Closer and closer to the end of the journey, Carver begins to ease up, perhaps as a counterweight to Isaac's rage at losing Ellie. At the end of the line, Carver opposes Isaac one more time, now siding with the individual instead of the mission. At this point, Ellie is revealed to still be alive. Danik holds her hostage at the source of the machine, capable of either restarting convergence or stopping it at the source. Given the choice of saving Ellie but losing to Danik, or overcoming Danik at the expense of Ellie, Carver takes matters into his own hands and gives Danik what he wants.
Everyone, don't let it all go dark, Isaac. There's more than one kind of right.
Perhaps in that moment, Carver condemned Earth and all of humanity to death. Logically, one could easily say he made the wrong call. But to stand against the futility of destruction, to even for just a moment give someone a last chance to say goodbye, there are worse forms of conflict you could perpetuate. Was it an attempt to do right after years of feeling like he'd done wrong? Was it being around Isaac for that long and seeing the worth in the individual? Was it finally being able to put the mission second? Who's to say? But in those moments, Carver stood against Isaac as nothing more than a man, not as an obstacle, neither right nor wrong, but as a counterpoint. Sometimes the mission needs to come first. And sometimes all you have at the end of the world is someone that you love. Then, without warning, the storm lifted and we saw them. They towered like gods with a twisted Olympus rising behind. Before I knew what was happening, I had fallen to my knees and was weeping uncontrollably, overwhelmed by my utter insignificance. These are the words left behind by a 200-year-old data log, detailing an expedition's first encounter with, albeit long since frozen, alien life. To know that there was life so long before us, so advanced in their existence, only to suddenly cease, is mortally humbling. To learn that the supposed birthplace of the marker was not the birthplace, but just another fallen civilization, is demoralizing, especially as your own species grapples with the same problems. To discover that they chose extinction on their own terms, rather than see the necromorph scourge perpetuate, was perhaps the only way they saw fit to one-up God. Giving Danik the MacGuffin device to use in the plot machine all but reverses the aliens' efforts, freeing an ancient entity from frozen slumber. The convergence events that Isaac narrowly escapes, stops, and subverts all had one end product in mind: the creation of a necromorph moon, a literal moon-sized necromorph entity created from the gathered mass of necromorph and other organic material. It is, for all intents and purposes, a cosmic horror. The conflict against God is hinted at throughout the latter parts of Dead Space 3, describing this brother moon as the would-be destroyer of Tal Volantis and its denizens. Colossal in size and scale, capable of immense and immediate destructive power, and all but sealing the fates of the species who would awaken it. And so it comes to pass. God has been freed, and their reign of destruction picks up immediately, and the conflict against God instantly becomes literal. What does it mean to awaken a god? When we go looking for something mysterious at the edge of our world, at the edge of our galaxy, what do we hope to find? What happens when we do find something and it's not what we expected or hoped for? What happens when it's exactly what we expected? What does it mean to fight a god? To stand against their untold might with nothing but the tools they perpetuated by their very existence? To fight for something as basic as survival against their utter detachment from you and everything you know? What happens to the world you knew after that? Can you ever see it the same way again? What does it mean to kill a god? To jam its own iconography into its eyes, to rip its one weakness out from inside, to drag it down into the planet where it will lie dead? A testament to what humanity is capable of. Where can humanity's triumphant possibly go from there if they have ascended that far? Perhaps all that the god killers can do at that point is die. What else can they do? These questions fly around the 11th hour battle against the Brother Moon as it is awoken, fought, and ultimately killed by the combined power of two species. Conflict against God is a fascinating dynamic in that only one side of the conflict sees it as an actual battle, the other a strange inconvenience. But after the first set of credits roll, unnerving questions remain. What does it mean when the weakness was a one-time deal, a weapon with one shot in the chamber? When we realized this was the youngest, the newest god? What does it mean if this was just part of a pantheon? The Brother Moon is dead on the surface of Tal Volantis, but signals and messages rip through the minds of those who remain, including Isaac and Carver. We are coming. We are hungry. In its brief time alive again, the Brother Moon reached out to its network, the other Brethren Moons scattered throughout the stars. They are coming. They are hungry. Drawn to the markers of humanity's own creation, they seek Earth. While the battle against the Brother Moon was on the offensive, the trials against the Brethren Moons are fully defensive. We cannot fight them, we can only prepare for them. The Brethren Moons indirectly battle against Isaac by inspiring the remnants of Unitology into a fringe cult. Where Unitology was obsessed with preservation and unity, the Splinter Group gives worship by mutilation and piecemeal sacrifice. Their goal, making the way clear for the Moons, is to fight and slow down Isaac and Carver. They do so. This begs the question, are the Moons threatened by Isaac and Carver? Or are they merely inconvenienced by them? In the face of conflict and antagonism, it is in our nature to wonder, what's the reasoning behind the Brethren Moons? How far back do they date? Where did they come from? Why do they do what they do? Is it simply to feed?
From each world we devour, a new brother will rise and be made whole. Our network will grow, and we will live forever.
To look into the eyes of God and have it look into yours is one thing. But to look into the eyes of God and have it ignore you, look past you, look through you, that is devastating, horrifying. To finally see the mantras of the faithful realized, the primal urges made into unifying calls, the truth of make us whole, it is all horrifying. The wills of gods are inscrutable, from divine punishment to their need to feed to the effect they have on our minds. Sometimes all we know is that their goals, primal they may be, stand against us, and all we can do in the face of that is resist or surrender. We cannot hope to comprehend them. We cannot hope to truly stand against them. The Brethren Moons are unstoppable. They stall Isaac and Carver long enough to elude them and find Earth. The trilogy ends with the Moons already descending upon our pale blue dot, another rising to meet Isaac and Carver's trajectory. They are presumed dead. Everyone is presumed dead. There is no secret ending. There is no sequel. There was only one final obstacle, impossible to overcome. In the end, we return to where we started. Conflict against nature. Nature old as it is, perpetuated by gods that people are ultimately destined to lose. Humanity is made whole. Roll credits.
I remember telling my college professor I wanted to study dead space. It's all dead space.
All stories need conflict. 2023's Dead Space, engineer Isaac Clarke needs conflict. In all its remaster, its remake, Dead Space needs conflict. Isaac's girlfriend, Nicole, is dead. Isaac jumped at the chance to be with her, even though it's too late. Routine mission is anything but routine, as Necromorph has done this before. He just doesn't know. It becomes a fight against necromorphs, against space, against, and the forces of fate itself. Most forms of conflict are tangible or perceivable in some form or another. Nature, technology, self, society, man, and God. All things that are, that can be pushed back against, even in vain. The final form of conflict is beyond that. It cannot be affected or fought or stopped. It is the ultimate immovable object, a fixture with roots too deep to fathom, a true inevitability. The final conflict is against fate. And that brings us to, and back to, Dead Space.
Damn! We lost her.
It doesn't matter. She can't escape her fate. But who can?
Fate has been personified in storytelling as something real or coming from something real. Actual deities who see all that has transpired and all that is to come. Powerful witches sharing prophecies, or clouded visions that don't come to pass for years to come. But fate in our interactive medium can feel different. Due to the interactive nature of video games, it is rarely to a developer's advantage to take agency away from players, even narratively. But remakes and remasters? It's the same game, the same beats, maybe updated mechanically for modern gameplay sensibilities, but you know what to expect. In 2023's Dead Space, players control engineer Isaac Clarke. Isaac and a small team are responding to a communications blackout on the USG Ishimura, a large-scale mining and planet-cracking vessel in orbit over the planet Aegis 7. Isaac's girlfriend, Nicole, is working aboard the Ishimura, so Isaac has a personal stake in the mission. The routine operation quickly takes a turn for the worse as horrifying twisted creatures called necromorphs attack and scatter the responding crew before destroying the crew's shuttle. With no way off the Ishimura, the routine mission becomes a fight for survival both against the might of the necromorphs and the indifference of space. Sounds familiar, right? Small elements are different. An Isaac that talks, more prominent crew members in the narrative, and some rejiggered encounters. But it follows the same beats as before. Isaac works with the crew to keep the Ishimura from buckling under the pressure of space and, ultimately, find a way to escape. It's the same journey. There is no escaping it. It was fated by powers outside of the narrative itself, a form of conflict that is truly unknowable to its characters. Of all the minor changes to Dead Space, most notable is in the New Game Plus run. After players complete the beat-for-beat retelling of the story, they can start the adventure over, loaded up with all their gear from last time, and take the fight to the necromorphs in a more offensive fashion. But new items are littered around. Small sculptures of the marker, each tacked with some unnerving description. Eagle-eyed players may remember a table in the unitologist captain's quarters, a marker figure in the middle, and 12 smaller pedestals surrounding it. Players may be compelled to collect these markers, replace them on the table, make them whole. At first, nothing seems to change. An ominous whispering in the back of Isaac's mind, but nothing too out of the ordinary given Dead Space. But then it starts to click in the back of players' minds. Isaac didn't say that last time. Isaac is acting stranger, more unhinged compared to the last time we played this chapter. Something is off. something is different. In the sense of fate, something is changed. Isaac is changed. The same beats play out. Isaac's dialogue is changed ever so slightly, and it all just feels like a subtle treat for observant players. Then Isaac escapes, just as he was fated to do. But...
Are we going home, Isaac? There's so much work to do.
Soon, I promise. Gotta build a little something first.
For me? What is it?
It's a surprise, sweetie. But I think you're gonna like it.
The entire journey up to this point was fated by the nature of a remake. But this? The future is cloudy. Is Isaac resigning himself to fate, finding peace in realization, having seen the truth through his efforts with the marker fragments? Is he emboldened by fate and the marker, by what he knows he is now responsible for? Does this diverge from the established narrative of Dead Space, or is it just another way to consider what inevitably awaits Isaac? After all, we know that Isaac will be captured and institutionalized by EarthGov, made to recount his time on the Ishimura tens or hundreds of times in their efforts to learn about the marker. Is this Isaac's mind splintering the more he has to recount it, remembering the horrors of the Ishimura differently, becoming more susceptible to the marker's messaging? Is this a completely branching narrative, presenting a new Isaac more actively in service to the marker's will? Or is it just a different perspective? A different moment on the singular timeline after Nicole's visage attacks Isaac, but before his capture? When the inevitable has transpired and the fated events have passed, what are those tied to that fate left with? There is no saying. There is no certainty. Not anymore. And so we, experiencing this story, are left uncertain of what to expect next. Fate is just as much a source of conflict when it is over as it is when it looms before us.
Time is patience when fate is inevitable.
The original Dead Space concentrated largely on the ship, on the experience of trying to keep it from falling apart, on survival. The remake retreads those beats, yes, but it also elaborates on the world, both as it's been established in previous games and in new, frightening ways. In post-game documents, players learn that Nicole, through her own digging and efforts, found a way to communicate directly with the marker aboard the Ishimura. Normally, the marker's thralls are beset with visions and hallucinations they can't distinguish from reality. Nicole is able to converse with the marker, trying desperately to understand how she can fix what is taking over the ship. To her, the information is cryptic and unfocused. But to players, especially those who have experienced the original trilogy, the marker is a harbinger, talking about architects and convergence, a portent of Isaac's journey yet to transpire. Nicole was a victim of what was to come, events out of her control, despite her every effort to understand and prevent them. In other documents, Dead Space sets up the same trajectory as the original series. Kendra has cracked into the computer core and found reference to 4 specific escapees from the early hours of the Ishimura's collapse, all pivotal characters from Dead Space Extraction. CEC employees talking up Titan Station, where unitologists will unleash a new necromorph outbreak in Dead Space 2. Foreboding graffiti heralding the Brethren Moons who wait in the dark to be summoned in Dead Space 3. They are all whispers of what players of the past know is coming for Isaac, a victim of the story that he is inexorably written into. But most unnerving is the indecipherable text log. Translating the marker script into our alphabet reveals something closer to the fateful prophecies of old.
They walk in white, untouched by red. They order the living, they shepherd the dead. Fingers touch, we're frozen still. They are the answer, they are the will. Beyond the stars, the brethren wait. Oracles deliver us. from humanity's fate.
The Oracle program was whispered about in the past, only explored through the salvage graphic novel and the Dead Space 2 DLC mission, Severed. The Oracle program seeks to understand the necromorph threat and have taken an interest in a particular character's immunity to the marker's influence. But after Dead Space 2, the program was not brought up in narrative again. The extent of where Dead Space may diverge in its future is uncertain, and yet it lays these breadcrumbs out all the same. We can assume that there are fixed points in this fated story. Necromorph outbreaks, emotional trauma, physical brutality in the name of survival and terror. That is the conflict against fate. We have the broad outline, but the individual brushstrokes, the colors, the specifics can be anything. Despite the certainty of fate, its greatest power against both characters and we who experience the work is uncertainty. Just because a character is destined to suffer does not mean we know everything about their suffering, yet. Both within and outside of the narrative, such is the power of conflict against fate. Fight it or accept it, all that you can do is wait for it.
I remember telling my college professor I wanted to study xenoarchaeology. He laughed right in my face. "There's nothing to study," he said. "It's all dead space."
All stories need conflict. If humans were truly alone in the galaxy, there would be no dead space. Sometimes it's the literal external forces standing in the way. Necromorphs as defined by nature. Humans as defined by their multifaceted desires, individually or societally. Or God, be it in faith or form. Other times it's internal. The self struggling between wants and needs. Our own internalized pain given form and voice by our regrets. Being consigned to a horrible story that you don't even realize you're a part of. Conflict's primary purpose, no matter the form, no matter the medium, is simple. To add uncertainty as to whether a character's goal will ultimately be achieved. Across 3 entries and a reboot, Dead Space explores all of those conflicted threads, different as they are individually, all woven into the same narrative web. They complement each other, occupying polar ends of a scale to provide a balanced scope of obstacles to overcome. They challenge and intrigue, making the victories that much more satisfying and the defeats that much more tragic. That is the core of conflict, pushing against the story's perspective so that the protagonist and their proxy, whether reader, viewer, or player, have the chance to push back and see it through, one way or the other. Conflict completes a story. Conflict makes it whole.
"There's nothing to study," he said. "It's all dead space."
Dead space. How truly comforting a notion in the face of so much conflict.